She made partner at a top litigation firm and then walked away. Why? Because courtroom victories were not solving the real problem. Today, Ursula Taylor helps leaders resolve conflict, not with arguments, but with emotional intelligence. And what she reveals next might change how you see workplace drama forever. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm really glad you're here. So I'm excited for this conversation. You built an incredibly successful legal career. What first drew you to the courtroom?
I mean, what drew me to the courtroom? I believe that nothing's wasted. I was meant to have that part of my life. It's given me skills and information and ideas and networks that I use today. But what first drew me to the courtroom? I think when I was 24, 25 years old in law school, operating from this false sense that if we just elevate the way we approach conflict in terms of appearing more civilized, let's engage these people called lawyers, and let's go to this prestigious place called a courtroom, and let's have this person in this black robe who looks pretty important preside over it. Now we're really dealing with conflict in effective ways because we have all these smart and important people in the room. So I would say it was that false idea that you can sort of seemingly elevate the atmosphere and make it something different than what it actually is, which is always human emotion.
So at what point did you begin to feel like doing litigation wasn't really the answer?
I mean, I didn't get quite to that point until maybe around COVID, around the time that, I had to go through every permutation of law firm. Started at a large law firm, then a boutique where I spent about 12 years, made partner. And then I thought, well, I always thought the way out was up, right? I didn't feel like I saw inefficiencies. I saw things that like, I want to do this differently. I want to do this in a higher, better way. And so the way out is up. Let me keep climbing, and ultimately grew my own practice and some niche expertise and opened my own law firm, and then found myself around, 2021, 2022, kind of looking around, and I didn't have like a management team in my firm to blame or some other partner. It was just me, litigation process, trying to solve my clients' problems, and just feeling really limited in what I had at my disposal to really help my clients be productive and effective in what they were trying to do.
So when you made that pivot from litigation to emotional resolution, how did your colleagues react to that?
I don't know. I think everyone that knows me and knows me well isn't terribly surprised. It was kind of dramatic, I suppose, to say I'm not doing this anymore. I was good at what I did. There was a lot. I had a lot going for me. How do my colleagues take it? I think as they understand it more, they're supportive, and I think there's a general sort of theme that there's this idea of burnout, and people burn out on law and they leave and they go. So I think for a lot of people, I probably just fit into that box. Like, oh, she's pivoting away from law, like so many people who just, maybe burnt out or can't hack it or this and that. But my story's a little bit different, I think, than that.
Yeah, I used to be a paralegal for insurance litigation firm for many years. And interestingly, that's what actually led me into my ultimately having my tech career. I worked for, at one point in my career, I worked for a single man satellite office of a firm in San Diego. And ironically enough, because it's coming up here, over Memorial Day weekend, the main firm in San Diego just shut down and didn't tell anybody. And so he scrambled, he pulled in some connections that he had, and we moved and merged with another firm. And the IT director there worked with me to get all the documents moved over and everything we needed, and then offered me a job. And I took it because, quite frankly, I was getting tired of dealing with the impatient, has to be yesterday. I always tell this funny story of, I had an attorney one time call me and say, you guys need to fix this printer before I throw it out the window. It takes 30 minutes to print a document. And so I went up there and I said, okay, let's print a document together. And I said, okay, I'm going to print 1, 2, 3, print. And then like 30 seconds later, the document was out. And I said, is that about how long it takes? Yes, it's crazy. I was like, I can't believe this, you know? And you have to, of course, it's customer service. You're within a company, but it's customer service. So you have to like do things to like make him feel better. And I'm like, well, sir, you know, it was only really 30 seconds. It wasn't 30 minutes. And then he's like, don't tell me what it was. And I just thought, you know, I'm going to take that job in the tech department permanently and not deal with this anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And then, you know, here I am today. So what is the biggest misconception though that leaders have about conflict? Because, you know, this show's about leadership, and leaders hear the word conflict and they shiver. So what's the biggest
Right.
misconception that they have about conflict?
I think the biggest misconception is what you just pinpointed with the shiver, right? That conflict is something to be feared or avoided. And when we have a fear of conflict, we're actually just adding another layer to the problem, right? So that fear-based need to avoid, minimize, not deal with, I see conflict as opportunity, actually. And the way it's opportunity is because usually, always, there's a human emotional driver to every dispute. And there's a human emotional driver for both participants. So conflict is actually the opportunity to sort of have this beautiful pathway or unlocking to sort of what your own limiting emotional energy or belief or thing is that has you in that dispute.
So I totally agree with you on that. It's actually why I said they shiver, because when I work with my tech leaders as my clients, they'll tell me about, oh, but you know, I don't want to upset them, and well, why not? You know, maybe you need to upset the apple cart here today. You know, maybe that has to
Right.
happen. Sometimes
Right.
conflict's necessary, and conflict, in my opinion, if it's handled correctly, most of the time isn't a bad thing. You know, you're you're dealing with something. So like this brings me to a point. You talk a lot about emotional roots of conflict. Can you explain what that means?
Sure. I mean, every dispute, every tension, every conflict there is an underlying human emotion because everything we do as humans is actually driven by our emotion. And it's a spectrum. On one side of the spectrum, we have the lower, denser emotions, the fear based emotions. So, fear, scarcity, insecurity, unworthiness, pride, apathy, lack, guilt, shame. Those are all the fear-based kind of emotions. And then what we're trying to get to is neutrality, like maybe courage, neutrality, hope, that kind of thing. And when we are making decisions as business leaders from this fear energy, that's infectious. So that's the other thing about emotion. We know that from our own human experience. We also see it bear out in science. Quantum physics shows us that like energy attracts like energy.
Yeah, I like your stress on being human, because that's something I think leaders need to remember, that they're human, and all humans, we have our limitations in certain areas for whatever reasons. And there's ways to overcome it a little bit, but you know, you got to, in a sense, I think what has to happen is you have to adapt to your limitations and work around it. It's like, you know, I'm getting older, and it's funny. I was just having this conversation with my wife this weekend, that I go to the gym and I only have one speed: go hard. And it's been how I've been my entire life. But as I get older, the go hard turns into, well, now you need like 4 days of rest because you can't make it back to the gym. And so I'm learning to like adapt to that and not maybe go as hard, right? And I think it's the same thing with conflict resolution. You know, as there's things you're going to be good at about that, and there's things you're not going to be, and you need to be real about that. So, but it seems like most organizations, as we were talking about, and people are kind of wired to ignore those emotional root causes. Why is that?
Fear. It's always fear. We're wired to avoid it. We're afraid of it. I mean, it can be any host of reasons, and it depends on the individuals and the leaders and the culture that they're creating. But sometimes we fear conflict. We just fear the reactions. But to your point, I mean, maybe the other person in a dialogue needs to sit in that uncomfortability. And my practice and what I do is really getting at each individual I'm working with. That fear itself, the fear of conflict, has us act in certain ways that are limited and contained and stifling and smaller. We take away from innovation, we take away from creativity. So it's the fear itself that's the problem, and not operating from a fear-based need to avoid, a fear-based need to control. whatever that is.
Yeah, it's weird. It's strange that there's such fear over conflict that people will completely avoid it, right? Like you said, like the plague, they want to run. So
Right.
what's one thing that the traditional legal system gets wrong about human behavior?
What the traditional legal system gets wrong about human behavior is that it doesn't even take into account human behavior. I mean, I think the traditional legal system is premised on this false idea that there's a right and a wrong. There's usually not. It's usually more eye of the beholder. And what we know as accomplished litigation attorneys is that we can always spin, we can always find another fact law argument or present it in a certain way. And it's really not about who's right, who's wrong. Let's allocate blame or fault. Because when we pull it way back to what individual leaders and companies are trying to do. Nobody's building profits from being right. Nobody's driving their bottom line by making someone else wrong. What these organizations want is they want solutions. They want out. But our legal system is built on the idea that one person's right, one person's wrong, blame, fault. And that's really limiting, really, really limiting.
One, and I think then leaders within these organizations, then they start to look at every situation like there's the right way and there's the wrong way, when actually there's just the way. You know, you choose the way that works for you and you go with it. I used to get chastised all the time by my CEO because I did a couple of things that were at the time considered really um, out of the ordinary. Like I had at the time we had this Nextel phones. You know, you could click the button and say hello, and then it would radio like a walkie-talkie, but it was also a cell phone. And so we would take our help desk number, and at the end of the day, it was auto routed to that phone. And then the next day would you would take it away from routing to the phone. And these my team got paid extra to handle these calls. And one day I was sitting there and I was thinking about it, and I was like, I'm really out of touch with what's going on in this company as far as my customer service from my department. And so I started taking every 4 weeks. They would do 4 weeks. Then on the fifth week, I would take the phone for a week. And then it'd be 4 weeks. Then I would take the phone for a week. And he kept saying to me, my CEO, you get paid too much money to be answering support calls. Why are you answering support calls? Until one day I finally just laid out for him all of the things I discovered and was able to fix by talking to the end user. And things like my people would get a sprint finished on Wednesday and it wasn't supposed to be finished until Saturday. And then they'd ask could they have Thursday or Friday off. Sure, take it off. Well, why are you giving them time off? Why aren't you getting started on the next sprint? Well, because we don't define the next sprint until we know how this sprint went, like that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And it was just like he was constantly looking at things differently. And finally, one day I just explained to him, I said, look, you hired me because you wanted me to direct your tech department. And this is how I do it. This is my way.
Mhm.
And you can talk to my team. They're happy. They're not leaving. I haven't had turnover in 5 years. It
Right.
must work. So
Yeah.
maybe just let me be me and do my things my way. And I handle, like he used to say things like, well, you didn't determine who was right and who was wrong because it didn't matter to me. A mistake was made. Let's not make that same mistake again. How can we avoid it? Who cares?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's just simple. So tell me something. You started Conflict Reimagined. How was it born, and what was your mission when you started out?
I mean, my mission when I started out is similar to my mission today. How was it born? I mean, I think it's born from what underlied my law practice is an ability to serve, ability to help people. I'm aware of my gifts, discernment and intuition and communication and an ability to kind of see. I don't see blame and fault, but I do see fear and feelings. And all of that made me a great lawyer, but I just felt limited in my ability to really help people and organizations realize their business goals, which is never winning litigation. The only people paid from litigations are the lawyers. So wanting to kind of like just get closer to actually helping them be better at what they want to do and what they're trying to do. I mean, that's really what founded it. It's an outgrowth of some of my frustrations as an attorney. And it continues today, wanting to help humans get back to doing what they do well, which is not litigating disputes.
How does emotional intelligence play into your methodology?
It's all of it. It's all of it. It's everything. Emotional intelligence is my greatest gift. And what I'm trying to really impart on the people I work with is awareness, consciousness. You know, we all operate from fear. We all have our limitations. We all have our obstacles and our stumbling blocks. And the first and most important thing you need to do is just put any ideas of shame and self-recrimination or self-judgment to the side so that you can actually see it and have some like conversation with yourself that's sort of open and curious, like your boss that's having a hard time with you like doing things that are a little more innovative. You know, he's probably got some fear there. He's wanting things to be pretty tight and pretty like in their place because he's a little bit afraid of not having complete control. I'm just speculating and guessing.
Yeah,
Like
no.
I'd be wanting to work with someone like that to kind of get a little bit deeper into it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I tend to agree with you on that. What does it take though to shift a team leader out of the old like reactive conflict and into growth?
It takes a yes, first and foremost. It takes a yeah, it takes a leader and a founder that sort of appreciates and understands that their team cohesiveness is important to their overarching business goals or their growth or what they're trying to do and effectuate. So it's somebody that sort of recognizes the importance of that to their overarching business goals or financial goals. So that yes, and that buy-in is most important. And then after that, it takes a leader or a founder who's willing to do the work himself or herself, who's willing to sort of like have a little bit of a vulnerability, have a little bit of a open and curious conversation with himself in order to create a space to unpack their own fear and insecurity and anxiety. And some people are like, no, 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 no. And those might not be my clients. And that's
How
okay.
how is resolution though different than victory?
Resolute of victory is a false concept. You know, what is victory? Right? Like, what is victory?
It's
When we're
very it's very flighty when you think about it.
right. And like stepping back, even just like putting on my strategic litigator hat as I'm like helping clients think about that. I mean, the thing with litigation is even the victory is not the victory. So you can win and get a ruling, but how much did that cost? How long did that take? How many depositions did you and your team members have to sit through? It's like, what was your budget and how far did you go over? What was the cost internally and externally? Was there PR from that litigation? Like, so this victory can sometimes be a hollow victory in terms of litigation and dispute resolution. So there's that piece is first and foremost.
Whereas resolution is, you know, both sides should be walking away mostly happy. You would think.
Right. I believe there's a path to that. Now, traditional mediation and traditional mediators will tell you, you know, a compromise is one where nobody's happy. And okay, that's fine. You can have that. I call that a ceasefire. I don't call that resolution. To me, ceasefire is like, let's stop bloodying and bruising and beating each other because our fear of the outcome, our fear of the cost outweighs whatever fear-based emotion had us in this dispute to begin with. When I think of resolution, I'm thinking about elevating outside of the fear. One side does it first, and that leads the other side. And all of a sudden, you're in a space where you can think in terms of problems and solutions.
That's excellent. I think like for me, I've always been a person who approaches things a little bit differently. So like relationships, I always used to hear about how, oh, you know, relationship is about compromise. And I don't do actually agree with that. I think relationship is about collaboration. I think it's more, and I mean, some people ask what's the difference. And to me, the difference is compromise means somebody gives something up, at least one person. Collaboration, though, means you take the two parts and you blend them together so that both people are getting what they want. And like, I've been married twice. And one of the things I learned from my first marriage was that compromise doesn't work, but collaboration does. Because what happens is you compromise at the time and then everything's settled. And then 6 years later, something comes up and you hear about how they weren't happy about the compromise 6 years ago, and you can't do anything about it. 6 years has gone by. But in this current relationship that I'm in, we worry more about I worry more about what can I do for her, and she worries more about what she can do for me. And when we have like a conflict, so to speak, we work it through so that, okay, this is what you want and this is what I want. How can we blend those together so that we get a solution that we're both happy with? And it's honestly, it's made for, I can remember in my first marriage many times thinking about divorce and whatever, never happening, and it hasn't happened in this relationship because I feel heard. And I think that's a big thing about collaboration is you feel heard. And I think what I might have added when you were talking about like resolution versus victory, I think resolution, you feel like you were heard. Victory, like you said, you might have just been the one who spent the best, most money on the best attorney. And so you came out on top, right? Like on top, so to speak.
Right. Think about the last time you felt victorious, or did it last? Even if you had that moment, did it last? And what cost did it what cost, cost of a relationship potentially. But I love what you're saying about compromise versus collaboration. And I completely agree. Compromise feels like there's an aspect of self-denial in it that almost feels fear-based. Well, I don't want to be in this fight anymore, but
Yeah.
collaboration is more 1 + 1 = more than two. It's founded on just like an awareness and a mutual respect and an open communication. And there's things that can be done to create that energy and that environment in teams and workplaces.
Yeah, I remember back in the beginning of this relationship, we had a situation that we had to deal with, and nobody had to say anything to anybody. I was like, okay, I'll go take care of this and this. And then she said, okay, well, I'll take care of this and this. And we had our roles, we took our parts, we came back together and we resolved the problem as a team. And
Mhm.
I think teamwork is less stressed when you're constantly compromising because you're looking to like kind of shoulder the other person to the side so you get more of what it is that you want. And I mean, I personally think this is sad, but I think most human beings are very selfish. They want to, if it can benefit them, that's what they want.
Yeah.
And it's kind of sad, but it is what it is. I mean, and so that's why compromise never works, because if both of them are super selfish, well, then all they're doing is fighting to get what they want and not really what's best for the situation or the end result, right? I think that's the key.
Right, right. Humans are selfish, and it's really a really important piece of my work with a lot of individuals and teams is figuring out the value system and the mutual alignments, right? Most of the time, everybody wants the same thing, right? We selfishly all want the same thing. They want growth, they want abundance, they want bonuses, they want promotions, they want all the things that come with having a successful team and organization. So even though humans are selfish, you can bring them into a mutual alignment. Um, in that way.
Agreed. So, do you think that the legal system itself, do you think it actually benefits from unresolved conflict? Because, like, if people really solved their problems emotionally, the industry would just collapse.
Yeah.
I think that
Yes.
actually that's the best answer. It's just yes.
Yes. I think it's antiquated, limited, flawed. I think our present legal system is based on a less evolved humanity, and I think we're moving into something higher. And that's not to say that there's not a place for a litigation. There are situations where that is just where you're at, and it is the highest and best way to maybe resolve a dispute. I'm not suggesting that it's gone, but I think if we were a little more evolved, conscious, aware, unafraid, the multi-trillion-dollar legal industry would be substantially different.
Yeah, yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I mean, having worked in the industry, I've seen behind the curtain, and it's just interesting how that all goes. But this has been an interesting conversation. Why don't you let the listeners know how they can connect with you if they'd like to?
Sure. You can connect me through my website, www.conflictreimagine.com. Hit the inquiry button or email me directly, Ursula@conflictreimagine.com. But I'd be happy to chat with any of your listeners about any actual or potential disputes and how I can help.
All right, Ursula. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and for the powerful work that you're doing to reimagine conflict as something transformational instead of destructive. Your story and your shift from legal wins to emotional breakthroughs is something every leader should hear.
Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate it.
So if you're watching and you want more conversations like this, don't forget that we drop new episodes every Wednesday. So hit the subscribe button, ring the bell so you're notified, and catch every insight packed interview that's coming your way soon. And by the way, leading at this level, it's not easy, but you don't have to white knuckle it. Stick around just for a second because I've got something for you that'll make it lighter.